From Yahoo Finance, this is Ballots and Dollars, a podcast about the politics that affect your pocketbook. I'm Rick Newman.
And I'm Alexis Christoforous. Today we're talking about Elizabeth Warren and how she continues to trigger billionaires with her wealth tax plan. The latest one, billionaire investor Mark Cuban, he said in a series of tweets a bunch of things about her wealth tax, but he also said that it is diverting attention from reality. And Rick Newman, would that reality be that Warren is one of the richest candidates running for president right now?
That's one of the things Mark Cuban is pointing out, and he's citing Forbes data. I guess her net worth is around $13 million. So notably, her net worth is below the threshold at which she would impose her wealth tax. Her wealth tax starts at $50 million, and then it gets the tax is higher once you're a billionaire. And again, that's on wealth, not on income. But I think Mark Cuban is also making the point that, first of all, the wealth tax is implausible for a bunch of different reasons. He's attacking Medicare for All, one of her big programs, which is part of what the wealth tax would pay for. And he's also just kind of defending billionaires. I mean, we've seen a real backlash from billionaires during the last couple of weeks. She's drawing blood among the 1% or the 0.1%, and they're starting to fight back. And I think this is really clever on Elizabeth Warren's point, because I think that is exactly what she wants. I think she wants billionaires to be attacking her, and I think she's just sitting there saying, bring it. Come on, everybody. I want all the billionaires in America.
That is coming from Leon Cooperman, who recently said that he thinks billionaires are being vilified. Bill Gates also had some things to say about Warren, right?
Yeah. So Bill Gates, his net worth is around $100 billion or so, I guess. And he said, look, I've paid $10 billion of taxes in my lifetime. And if I had to pay $20 billion, I guess that would be okay. But he said, he basically said, you know, the number she's talking about, I'd have to start to do the math. In other words, he would have to say, is this actually going to cut into my wealth and going to degrade my wealth over time? And there are questions about that because, her tax on billionaires, I think it used to be 3%. But when people like me and a lot of others said, how are you going to pay for Medicare for All? She came out with a plan and she decided she had to raise her wealth tax on billionaires from 3% to 6%. So if you're paying a 6% per year in tax on your wealth, you have to earn 6% on your wealth just to stay even.
Stay even, right?
And our audience might think, well, billionaires, don't they earn like 20 or 30% per year? Not necessarily. Just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean that you get higher returns. Sure, you can invest with hedge funds and stuff like that, but hedge funds have actually been having bad years. We are going to have downturns in the stock market also, where people's net return will be negative for a year or two at some point in the future. So if you're hitting them with a 6%, I'm not saying I'm opposed to the wealth tax, but I'm saying this is how they're thinking about it.
But also, isn't part of it the way she would tax capital gains, that she would tax it at face value even before a profit was realized?
I don't think it's any single policy that's triggering these people. I think it's all of them combined, because she wants to raise the capital gains tax. But the reason she's focusing on a wealth tax is because she says if you just do this through the usual way, try to get more money from the wealthy through raising the income tax or the capital gains rate, she basically says we have too many loopholes that will allow them to wriggle out of that. Now, a lot of people say, tax experts say, well, why don't you just close the loopholes instead of trying this new wealth tax, which is kind of a dubious proposition. But she's, in addition to take as much as we can from the wealthy, she also wants to put a surtax on corporate income for companies that earn more than $100 million per year. And if you total up everything she is proposing, which I've done, the cost would be about $4.2 trillion per year in new spending. That's in new spending. Whoa. Now, the government only spends about $3 trillion, right? I mean, so you would more than double federal spending. So if you're going to pay for it all, you need $2 trillion in new taxes. So she's taxing everything. Also, financial transactions is another one. So she has just got Wall Street and the billionaire class up in arms, and I think that's exactly what she wants.
But if so many people have said on so many levels that this could never pass muster, even if she were to make it to the White House. So then why promise things? I mean, she's a smart woman. Warren has to realize that this is a very slim chance what she's talking about would actually see the light of day. So why talk about it?
Well, that's perfect, isn't it? So she can talk about these ideas that sound radical and are populist. Basically, she's saying, let's take from the rich and give to the rest.
And when she can't do it, she'll point the finger and say, see, I tried, and no one's helping me out.
I think that's exactly it. So she is now, I think it's fair to say she's now a front runner along with Joe Biden. I think the two of them are.
They keep flip-flopping, right? In the latest, I saw a Quinnipiac poll had Warren with 20%, rather Biden with 20% and Warren with 16%.
Yeah, so she is not overtaking Biden. She is not surging ahead of Biden, but she has surged to become pretty even with Biden. And at this point, it's Biden and Warren. And in some polls, it's no longer Bernie Sanders, who's number 3, but it's Pete Buttigieg coming up as the youthful moderate. But
who actually has a net worth, I read, of less than $1 million.
In my range.
He's in my range. One of the few running
but probably not for long.
Running for president, right, I would have to imagine.
He's becoming famous. But so if you, now I've spent a lot, we've talked before on this podcast about all of Elizabeth Warren's plans. And when you go through them, even if she becomes president, and even if she becomes president with a Democratic House, I think it still is very unlikely that most of her plans could pass through Congress. Most of them require Congress to change the law or pass new laws. So let's just take Medicare for all, for example. It is nowhere near a given that if Democrats have control of the White House and Congress, they will automatically pass Medicare for all. There are many Democrats who don't support it, who are more moderate, who represent more moderate districts, and they're nowhere near willing to go to their constituents and say, we're moving all of you off your private insurance if you have it, and we're putting everybody into a government program. It's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So if you just carry through and you look connect the dots on all of her plans between spending and revenue. So then if she can't get that, then she doesn't need the wealth tax to fund Medicare for all. So couldn't she use it to fund something else? Yes, she probably could. But there are problems with the wealth tax in itself. Voters are fine with the idea, let's just tax the wealthy and let's make it a wealth tax instead of an income tax. Because, one of the things voters worry about when they hear about raising taxes on the rich is, well, how do you define rich? And don't all taxes just filter down to at some point they affect me? And that kind of happens and kind of doesn't happen. I think with a wealth tax, voters think that I'll never have $50 million worth of stuff. So sure, that's fine with me. And let's say it falls all the way down to $10 million. I'm never going to have $10 million worth of stuff. That's most voters. Not all, but most. So I think the wealth tax is plausible, except there's this matter of constitutionality. And this gets a little bit complicated because it's kind of a legal technicality. But in the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, it says any direct tax, and a wealth tax would be a direct tax, has to be apportioned among the states according to population. And you cannot impose a tax that way like this because of the differences in population, you would have to have a much higher wealth tax in lower populated states. And it would just become you'd end up having 50 different tax rates for 50 different states. It would literally have to be different for every state. That's inherently confusing. And then it would just be prohibitively high for some states. So you would cause all these terrible unintended consequences. I mean, wealthy people would just leave. They would just flat out have to leave West Virginia and Mississippi because the tax would be too high. And it's not, it's hard to write a law around that because it's in the Constitution. Right. So it's probably not going to be worth the fight. And if Congress were to pass a law, like many things we've seen happen with Trump, it would probably be challenged immediately. And the Supreme Court these days, by the way, leans conservative. So the wealth tax may be a non-starter. But nonetheless, if Elizabeth Warren's goal is to maybe have this as a plausible way to come up with some money, but also piss off all the billionaires and get them to be attacking her to make her look like somebody billionaires hate, she's totally succeeding.
Another billionaire she attacked pretty quickly was Michael Bloomberg, when there was word that he would be entering the race. I mean, I think she tweeted something at him about, come on and join, and she wants to talk to him about her billionaire calculator and how much he would owe under her wealth tax. I don't believe Michael Bloomberg has responded to that. I think he has bigger fish to fry right now.
Well, Bloomberg's thinking so think about who Mike Bloomberg's friends are. It's wealthy Wall Street people. And
Leon Cooperman already said if Mike runs, he would
and I'm sure he's hearing from them. man, could you please get in the race so that we don't have to deal with Elizabeth Warren and her horrible wealth tax and all these other things that are going to bankrupt the country, or even worse, from some people's perspective, hand Trump an easy win that he shouldn't otherwise have, because he's without a doubt going to brand Warren as a socialist. And some voters are going to buy that. So Bloomberg's probably hearing this from his friends, and he did float this idea. Now, he hasn't said he's running. What he has done is file to run right before the deadline in Alabama, where you have to file if you want to be on the ballot. And if he were to run, he would, without a doubt, position himself as the socially liberal but fiscally moderate and business-friendly Democrat. And by the way, he would, without a doubt, be the richest person in the race, far richer than Trump. And Elizabeth Warren, I kind of love that she did this. Her wealth calculator. So when these billionaires started griping and making headlines, I don't know if she was planning to do this anyway, but right around that time on her campaign website pops up a wealth tax calculator. So if you go there, the first thing it asks you, it says, "Are you a billionaire?"
It's kind of fun to play around with the calculator. I've done it.
And I typed in no, which is the truth, but I did it more than once, and then I typed in yes. So if you type in no, you get options that say, well, are you interested in the wealth tax, what the wealth tax paid by some prominent billionaires might be? Mm-hmm. And it's auto-populated with Jeff Bezos, the Amazon CEO, Mike Bloomberg. I think she put Leon Cooperman on there.
After he started to talk
Leon
up.
Cooperman is not one of the most prominent billionaires out there. Most people don't even know his name, but she's favoring him, I guess, because he had the temerity to attack her publicly. So according to her wealth calculator, Mike Bloomberg's wealth tax in the first year would be about $3 billion in extra tax he'd have to pay. So his net worth is around $52 billion, according to Forbes. And Bloomberg does a billionaires index, and I don't know if they include Michael Bloomberg himself.
I'm sure they do. I would imagine they do.
Let's say $52 billion. So 6% of that is around $3 billion. And so, do the math a little bit. It's $3 billion this year, and then another 6% next year, and then another 6% the year. So it's 6% per year. It's not a one-time thing.
Right.
So you can just plug some numbers in, and you can see, well, Mike Bloomberg would have to earn a 6% return. You can see that just to stay even.
You know what? Her calculator and her wealth tax plan doesn't seem to take into account what these billionaires do philanthropically. And I'm
correct.
wondering if it should, because they're giving a lot of their post-tax money to charities that are making a huge difference. Look at what Bill Gates is doing when it comes to research for cancer, and we can go on and on with what these billionaires are doing very publicly and sometimes not very publicly.
Right. Bill Gates has signed up to the Giving Pledge, so he is going to end up giving away most of his wealth and putting it in foundations and things like
Along
that.
with Warren Buffett
has done that also. Leon Cooperman, I don't know if Leon Cooperman I don't know if he's joined the Giving Pledge, but he did say in his own defense, he said, I've given tons and tons of money away to charity. And then, these billionaires they're not just throwing $100 bills out the limousine. Mm-hmm. They are pretty careful about what they fund. And their point is, I earned this money. And even if I'm not going to spend it on myself, I have the right to decide how to spend it.
Right. They should
They want to spend it on the causes they care about.
A
lot of these guys also, they want the least amount of money going to the government because they think the government spends it the worst.
Well, look at what J.P. Morgan, Warren Buffett, and Amazon are doing when it comes to healthcare. Yeah. They're taking matters into their own hands, and so a lot of these billionaires, I think, are doing the same with their money in charitable ways.
And you reminded me when you mentioned J.P. Morgan. Jamie Dimon is another one who has now come out criticizing. He says she's vilifying successful people. She shouldn't be doing that. And Jamie Dimon is a billionaire. I actually did not know he was a billionaire. Billionaire is such a rarefied club that it's hard to get there, even if you earn $20 million as a CEO for 20 years in a row.
Absolutely.
Because if $20 million times 20 years is $400 million, you're not a billionaire.
That's right.
And that's if you don't spend any of it. So I guess Jamie has been in the business long enough and made good investments that he's now over the $1 billion mark. But he's another one. Mm-hmm. And by the way, these are sort of liberal billionaires.
That's
these
right.
are some of these are Democrats. I think Jamie Dimon, I don't know if he is still a Democrat. I think he used to be, and he sort of leans that way. And they're the ones attacking Elizabeth Warren. So in a way, these guys are attacking her from within her own party, just as some centrists are attacking her. And by the way, Joe Biden is going to be attacking her more and more. So he has been going after her for kind of the same reason. Joe Biden says, we don't need to punish anybody. Like, we can get America back to normal is kind of his claim, without punishing anybody. And by that he means we don't have to take large amounts of money from the wealthy and give them to somebody else.
You bring up a good point about Democrats within her own party sort of turning against her now, because I understand some of the big Democratic donors are basically telling Chuck Schumer, the minority leader, look out, because we're not going to fund some of these campaigns if Warren keeps on about all this, which would make it very difficult for her to get anything done if she weren't able to have a Democratic Congress.
Playing right into her hands. I mean, this is
really. So you think that this is part of her grand plan?
I don't know if she is clever enough to. She could have foreseen it. I don't know if she is clever enough to have actually tried to bring about that very thing. Mm-hmm. But she said from the start during her presidential campaign, not during her senatorial campaign, by the way, her last one, but while running for president, she's not taking any big money donations. She's only taking small dollar donations. She's not going to have a super PAC, which is where the big money tends to go. And she's raising tons of money. So if she becomes the nominee, it's quite possible that some of those funders won't be contributing money to what would basically be a Democratic super PAC. So that would be the Democratic National Committee and other groups that would at that point be campaigning on Warren's behalf. But if you're a Democrat, you have to get behind Elizabeth Warren if she's the nominee.
Now, the
funders don't, though. The big money does not.
Exactly. They can definitely talk with their wallets. That Quinnipiac poll that we talked about earlier found that 54% say they would never vote for Michael Bloomberg. Are you? Do you think that it's
Democrats
going
to
be? That's Democrats.
Yeah, doesn't surprise me at all. And this is why I think Bloomberg is not going to get in the race. And I've written that he is testing the water. And I think he's going to find that the water is very, very cold because you've had more than 20 campaign operations on the ground in all the key states, doing all the hard work for a year or more. John Delaney's been doing this since the middle of 2017. And primary voters, Democratic primary voters who've been listening to these candidates, they don't want a billionaire parachuting in at the last minute saying, I'm here to rescue you. And I think another problem is I guess Mike Bloomberg thinks he's the antidote to Joe Biden, but he's not. He and Joe Biden are actually very similar in terms of their policies, and Joe Biden is 1 year younger. So what problem with Biden does Mike Bloomberg solve? The only one I can think of is that he can fund himself. He has unlimited money to fund a campaign, which Biden does not. Biden has struggled with fundraising, but if Biden becomes the nominee, he's going to have the whole party behind him.
But would he not be a friendlier candidate for Wall Street or those moderate Republicans who might be on the fence?
I don't think so. I think Biden is actually pretty cozy with Wall Street. I think he won't come out and say it. But if you have Biden on the ticket and not Bloomberg, who else are Wall Street donors going to give to? They might give to Pete. They are actually giving to Pete Buttigieg because he is relatively centrist, and healthcare is the litmus test for where all these people stand. And Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, full-on Medicare for all, get rid of private insurance. Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg, we need a new public option for people who can't get good private insurance but leave private insurance intact. That's kind of how you distinguish it. So, yeah, Buttigieg is getting some funding, and I think that's fine. He's a new player in the Democratic Party. He's going to be around for a while, and you should have guys like that. If Buttigieg does not win, and he's not favored to win at the moment, he'll be a speaker at the Democratic National Convention this summer. He could end up in a Democratic administration as a cabinet member. He's obviously become a prominent and likable young face among Democrats who's going to be around for a while.
Well, you know what? I think that the next few debates are going to be really entertaining.
I think they're actually going to get better. You make a good point. I think we're still going to have 10 candidates in the November debate, but after that, it's going to shrink. And Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren are going to have to stop treating each other like senatorial colleagues. And I think both of them are going to start really highlighting the differences between them. And we're going to see some fight from Joe Biden, I think, which we have to. If he's a viable candidate, we have to see Joe Biden coming out and really holding his ground in the middle, because that's where he's being assaulted.
All right. I want to thank everybody for listening to this podcast today, and be sure to follow us. I'm at Alexis TV News.
I'm at Rick J. Newman.
Be sure to go rate and review what you just heard. We'll be back next week with a fresh podcast.
All the Billionaires. Check it out.